Hello everyone and welcome to a new video in this series. Uh, Today we will continue our discussion of energy models, but we will focus on the empirical energy models in particular. So in the previous video, we outlined several energy models available, but the focus starting from this video and for the upcoming few ones will be on empirical energy models. And it might actually uh, be important to have a global view of how do we consider these empirical energy models. So if one tries to be very rigorously, we can write something similar to Taylor's theories in mathematics, where we say that the potential energy of all the atoms in the system, which depends on the coordinates of all the atoms. So for example, it depends on the position vector of the first atom, the second atom, all the way to atom number n, is going to be given by the following expansion. And just to highlight what we mean by these position vectors, we can imagine a coordinate system where the atoms are located inside the system. And then there is some origin by choice, and then each atom has a position vector to describe it. So this is the position vector of atom number one. This is the position vector of atom number two, where the enumeration is also arbitrarily. This is for atom number three, and so on and so forth. So the total potential energy of the system can be thought of as a sum, and that sum is, in a sense, similar to Taylor's series in mathematics. So how does it go? There is the one body term. So it is the potential energy due to the location of each atom with no interaction or no effect from the surrounding atoms. And this goes as a sum from atom number one all the way to the last atom. So this is what we call the one body term. And one body term, it is like, for example, the effect of external fields. For example, if there is an electric field in this direction, then this electric field will induce force and definitely energy for each one of these atoms. And that force or interaction between the atoms in the field is a one body term, because if I am considering how this atom interacts with the field, I don't need to consider the locations of the other atoms at the same time. For example, this is the symbol force charge times field. So that's the one body term, and it could be present in certain simulations depending on your own interest in the problem that you are trying to solve. Next, the second, and in fact the most important term, is it's a potential energy term, but it's a two-body term. So it's a function of the position vector of atom number I and atom number J. And there is a sum also here, but this is a sum over all pairs. So that means I need to consider the interactions of all of the pairs. And in the language of computer simulation or physics, we call this as a two-body term, because it really depends on the position vector of the two atoms, or, in a simplified way, if you want to think about it, it depends on the distance between the two atoms. For example, between R1 and R2, it depends on the distance between these two atoms. The sum goes over all the pairs, and let me illustrate this point. Suppose, for example, you have four atoms, so you can make a list: atom number one, atom two, atom three, atom four. Repeat the list again: one, two, three, four. And then the two-body term need to run over all possible pairs. So, for example, between one and two, one and three, one and four. And then next, you consider two and three, two and four. And finally, you consider the interaction between 3 and 4. So this is all the possible pairs. So definitely I don't double count. So 3 and 4 is exactly the same as 4 and 3. So this is the so-called two-body term. An obvious two-body term that you can think of is Coulomb interaction. Because if you remember from basic physics, Coulomb interaction is really between two charges there is no impact from the immediate impact from the surrounding charges on the Coulomb term. The series goes on, and in fact, there is three body term. So it's the potential energy due to three body terms. So it's a V of Ri, Rj, Rk. So it depends on three position vectors. And this actually goes as a sum over all triplets. So you see, for example, this is one triplet, R1, R2, R3. It's a triplet centered on R2. And by the way, this could be different than a triplet which is R, let's actually do it with a different color, maybe with blue, which is R3, R1, and R2, so but centered at atom number 1. So you need to consider all possible triplets when you calculate this term. So this is what we call as three-body term. And if you have watched our previous video about bonding types, you might actually recall that this would be important in covalent bonding. For example, this is a very crucial term to maintain the angle of the water molecule. But then the series keeps going. And in fact, I'm not going to write this in complete details, but definitely there is a four-body term. This is particularly very important for polymers and biological molecules such as proteins. You can even go to higher order terms if you need, depending on the kind of material that you are studying. And this term and this expansion is supposedly infinite, but definitely we consider a finite problem uh, based on n number of particles. So the series really keeps going until we reach to the so-called n-body term. And the n-body term, again, if you consider our discussion um, bonding types, the n-body term would be particularly important for metals. Metals are n-body species. The cooperative bonding in metals is very, very obvious, and definitely they need an n-body term. Now, the question is, do we really consider all this expansion in modeling every material? So certainly not. Certain materials can be reasonably well, or certain at least materials or interactions can be reasonably described by one or two of these terms. So let's actually briefly summarize. One body term, you might not need it at all, except if you have an external field, for example, electric, magnetic, gravitational fields as well, but gravitational fields are very, very weak, and that's why we usually ignore them in computer simulation of materials. Two-body terms are very important. They represent Coulomb interaction. They represent even van der Waals interaction, so they are definitely important. If your material exhibits some covalency, then three-body term will be important. If your material exhibits some, one-dimensional extension similar to proteins and polymers, then the four-body term will also be important. And metals in particular definitely require an n-body term. But they also need a van der Waal because, as we said, that van der Waal exists everywhere. And because van der Waal exists everywhere, you would imagine that every material simulation will definitely include a two-body term. All right. So we would like to start with two-body terms. So that will be the agenda. We will start with two-body terms, three-body terms, and then we will jump directly to how n-body terms look like for metals. So let's actually move on to two-body interactions. There is also another useful name for this that's very common in literature. We call them pair potentials, right? Pair potentials. And in fact, under the umbrella of two-body interactions, we will list several possibilities. Two-body interaction to represent van der Waals interaction, in particular the so-called Leonard-Jones potential. And under this umbrella, we will also study an interaction to represent ionic materials. And in particular, we will discuss the so-called Buckingham plus electrostatics. And that will be it for two-body interactions. Beyond that, we will jump to discuss three-body interactions. So in the next video, we will start with Leonard Jones' potential. Thank you and see you in the upcoming video.